Good evening, hello, wherever you are. And as an audience member at this super webinar, feel free to indicate on the chat where you are at the moment and also anything else you want to say. So feel free to start the chat going with, I am from Nottingham, or I am in Nottingham, or whatever it is. And let's hear a little bit about you as we go. But I will now introduce, we have got another super session for you featuring Sarah Armstrong-Smith. And we have a particularly special session for reasons I'll tell you in a minute. Instead of a interviewer interviewing a panel of celebrities, let's say, we have got a panel of interviewers for you interviewing Sarah, and she is more than capable of handling that, I know. But we are in the BCS, British Computer Society, Chartered Institute for IT, and everybody who you'll see on screen in our panels and so on is a BCS member, so that's truly wonderful. My name is Darling. I'm the chairman of 3 great groups in the BCS, 3 branches: London North Branch, London Central Branch, and London South Branch. Loads of great colleagues, loads of wonderful IT skilled people. And if you're not in the BCS yet, I really urge you to think about joining. It's well worthwhile. You'll meet some of my colleagues in a minute, but I just want to say that in these 3 branches, we've set up a community, the London Branches 3 community, and that is the body that's presenting for you tonight. The groups that I've mentioned have a number of things going. We have initiatives based on committee members' skills and interests. So, for example, we have an initiative on security, we have an initiative on cyber, and we have an initiative called Wominspiration. And all 3 of those are represented tonight. We also have many people from other BCS groups. Welcome. From whichever BCS group you're from, welcome to this session. And we have a number of people who are not members of BCS. Again, welcome. I think you'll have a great evening today. I've mentioned our initiatives. This session relates to cyber, secure IT, and Wominspiration. Now, the people on the panel are all participating as members of those initiatives. And I would therefore like to introduce you to Chloe, to Anna, and to Diana. Diana is the lead for our session tonight. So let me hand over to Diana.
Hi, hi to everyone here. Thank you very much, Dalim, for all of your kind words. I have noticed that in the meantime, people have commented and said that there are already so many from the UK and also from America and Canada. So we've reached as far as Canada for now. I'm very happy to present this fire chat with Sarah Armstrong, which she has come and she travels all over the world, just came back from Israel and will go to Portugal next. But in the meantime, she got a bit of time for us to chat as well. I am going to present and to just put questions to her together with Chloe and Anna, which are 2 of my colleagues from BCS. And we will talk to her about her role at Microsoft, her new book, which just came out in November, and also her role as an advisor for startups and SMEs. In case we have any more time, we will also ask her opinion about Ukraine and the threat landscape there. But I just wanted to let everyone know that during this whole chat, whenever you have a question as well to add, just put it in the chat and we will get to it, and also try to get as many questions during this time as well, in order to have everyone's questions answered, not just us. In order to start this discussion, Sarah, would you please tell us a bit more about your role at Microsoft now?
Yes, good evening, good afternoon, morning, wherever you're joining from. I'm absolutely delighted to be with you all today. Yes, so my name is Sarah Armstrong-Smith. I'm a Chief Security Advisor at Microsoft. So I've been at Microsoft just under 3 years. I'm coming up to my 3rd anniversary in April. I actually joined Microsoft just as the UK was going into lockdown. So I spent the first 18 months of my career actually on Teams, believe it or not. But my role, in essence, I operate across Europe. And my role is really to look after Microsoft's biggest strategic and major customers. So that's multi-sector and multi-country as well. So I typically liaise at that kind of C-suite level. So that could be CISO, CIO, CTOs, those type of roles. And it's really to understand the biggest challenges that our customers are facing. So these can be challenges when it comes to cloud adoption, digital transformation, but the big thing that keeps everyone up at night is really around cybersecurity. And that's where I spend a really big part of my role and my time, talking to lots of different customers. So it can be financial services, retail, energy. It's really trying to get to grips with just how much the world has changed, even in that 3-year window, but not just focusing on the here and now, how things are going to continue to evolve, and therefore how can companies like Microsoft really help customers in that journey that they're on.
Thank you. I know that you've talked a lot before as well about the idea of promoting as much as possible innovative technology. So I wanted to ask, how does the role specifically connect to this desire of constantly promoting innovative and new technology?
I think one of the key things that I reflect on, even when we think about the fact we've just been in a global pandemic, so that has led to seismic change across the industry, across the globe. Particularly, we've seen a mass acceleration to the cloud. So a lot of companies were already on their journey to the cloud. But what we've seen is something that might take months or years is now happening in weeks or days. It's really operating that fast. So that's a kind of the third thing, is that mass acceleration, how people are utilizing the cloud. The second thing that we're seeing really is regards to changing business models. And we're seeing a huge amount of customers wanting to embrace smart technology, so IoT, and also OT, operational technology as well. So one of the key things when we're talking about cybersecurity in particular, no longer are we just talking about cybersecurity from an IT perspective. It really goes across absolutely everything that we're doing across the globe. And that's where, from enterprises, it's individuals, it's schools, it's everything. Cybersecurity really touches on every area. And I'd probably say the third thing, which is probably even in the last 2 months, we've seen a kind of a real people really wanting to invest more in artificial intelligence and machine learning. And that's, again, accelerating at a pace we've not really seen before. So people are probably used to seeing ChatGPT, and they're starting to experiment a lot more with generative AI. So not just in terms of how you utilize the generative AI, ChatGPT, how do you do your homework and how you're writing, university and all of those. But we're also starting to see the images that are being generated. And that's led to a lot of questions when it comes to responsible AI. So the technology is advancing at a pace that we've never seen before. So as much as we're talking about the technology and innovation, we've really got to kind of embrace it at scale. And the challenge that we have when we're thinking about the use of AI and different types of different technologies, the regulations around that is taking too long for playing catch up. And so it's relying on companies like Microsoft, big tech companies, but also the organizations that are utilizing the technology to really think about the responsibilities of that technology, how it's being utilized, and how it's being utilized for good, but also how it's going to be utilized for nefarious purposes. And so we kind of have this balance that we have to be able to operate in. So as much as we want to innovate, as much as we want to do these cool things, and even in the next couple of years, we're going to be talking about the metaverse, and all of those type of things, and what does that mean in reality. So technology is going to really interplay into so many different aspects of our life, and we are so dependent on that innovation and bringing that innovation to the table, and so people aren't scared about it. But also we've got to make sure that to a certain extent we put the brakes on with regards to making sure that we're embracing that technology in the right way. So security, privacy, compliance really kind of comes front and center to a lot of the things that we're talking about.
Okay, thank you. So taking into account the mass acceleration and also the interoperability we see throughout the industries and the domains, as you said, what do you consider the biggest challenge that you have faced so far within all the solutions that you have provided?
The biggest challenge, I think, is really when we roll the clock back to the beginning of the pandemic. So at the beginning of the pandemic, everything was about availability. It was about how do we get people up and running as quickly as possible. And then as the kind of pandemic went on for 1 year, 2 years, and it's still, it's still going on in some areas, we kind of saw that massive change when it comes to hybrid working. So a lot of organizations have really had to completely rethink their business models. So you've gone from some industries, maybe like financial services, a very locked down environment, and all of a sudden they're working from home, they're working on multiple different devices. And the reality is that it's really about being able to work from any device at any time from anywhere. And that's the kind of the reality. So when we're thinking about some of the challenges about just how do you connect online, and one of those things has been around the need for collaboration. So not only have we seen that mass acceleration to the cloud, we've already also seen the use of Zoom as we're on today, Teams, all of those things. And that brings its own challenges. So as much as we're trying to connect people, we've then got the issue of sharing and oversharing of information and data. We've got privacy issues. So that's kind of been probably one of the biggest challenges that we've seen, in that kind of last couple of years. But on top of that, from a cybersecurity perspective, a lot of the attackers have really taken advantage of the fact that we've got a lot of people working remotely, so many new processes, so much change, and they're being manipulated in essence. So we're seeing a huge rise in phishing emails and COVID-19 related phishing laws, and they're preying to people's vulnerabilities. So we've had an energy crisis, we're probably going to go into recession. And so all of this is just designed to target those individuals. And even in the last 2 years, we've seen one of the biggest cyber attacks in history, which is actually SolarWinds. So we believe that is genuinely one of the most sophisticated cyber attacks that we've ever seen. And that's a supply chain attack. So it's really looking at all of those trusted relationships that companies have with their third parties, particularly with IT service providers. So a lot of companies are outsourcing all or some of their IT, and there's a trusted relationship there. So even like Microsoft, if you think every month we have Patch Tuesday, and so we send updates to people. And this particular cyber attack was piggybacking on the back of a legitimate update and causing as much damage, as much disruption as possible. And then obviously the third thing that we've had in the last year is the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So that has all three of those things combined have really created a perfect storm from a cybersecurity perspective. So much change. And it's just really goes to kind of show you just kind of how the world has evolved in that space of time and how things are evolving so quickly. So in a roundabout way, we're always playing catch up, and therefore the technology kind of has to evolve, the security has to evolve with it. So when I talk to my customers, the real thing to bear in mind is, yes, we're talking about the threat here and now, So I've talked about phishing. We had a huge increase in business email compromise, so where people are intercepting legitimate transactions or messaging in email, and they're trying to intercept that with a fake invoice or those type of things, but also seeing ransomware as well. So these are kind of current day threats. But we need to kind of think about, as I said, what's going to happen over 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 3 years from now. So when companies are investing in technology, they don't want to be in a perpetual cycle of transformation. They don't want to kind of get to the end of 18 months. They've just put out this new product. The world has moved on so much, the threats moved on that much, and then they have to start all over again. And that's the challenge is, when you're thinking about this technology, how that technology is being utilized, is it going to provide the longevity so that it can cater for not just today's threats, but the threats that are on the horizon as well?
Thank you. And coming back onto this, so we just talked about the availability and the need for availability in the past 18 months and how important it has been. And obviously there's always a trade, especially because this whole environment has created a perfect moment of chaos for everyone around us, even the bad guys. What would you consider the first thing that a company should focus on when it comes to cybersecurity? Is it protection? Is it resilience? What exactly would they have to focus the first thing to make sure that, that would be their priority?
Well, the first thing really is to expect the unexpected. So what does that mean? That means that we have to have an assume compromise mindset. So for the best will in the world, the best technology and all the strategy and everything else, we have to assume that somebody can get access into our network, into our systems and into our data. So that's our kind of starting point. And therefore our strategy is really simple. It's to protect the access in and to prevent the exit out. So there's two things that really come into play there. So the first one is making sure we have a clear strategy when it comes to identity. So when I talk about identity, that's the identity as an individual and identity of any devices that people are connecting with. And so that's really important, particularly where I sort of said, over 80% of all cyber attacks start with some kind of credential theft. And this is where you kind of see those phishing emails. They're trying to collect people's credentials. That's your username, it's your password. And we are tracking approximately 1,300 password attacks every second. So that's roughly around 77,000 a minute. And so this is where the main attacks are coming from. So what we're seeing is a rise of access brokers. And this is kind of cybercrime as a service, if you like. And this is where we're sort of seeing a lot of outsourcing that's going on into the dark web and with cyber criminals. And so the first part of that is to try and get in and out as quickly as possible, just to collect as many credentials, collect as many passwords, and then they kind of move up the food chain, if you like. So they may start with the low-hanging fruit, which is potentially education and schools. And if I kind of reflect on what we were talking about with COVID and the pandemic, a lot of children and schools and universities ended up going online. Ended up working remotely from home, and the devices that they have, they're probably begging and borrowing and utilizing a parent's device, and therefore a lot of the devices are not very secure. And so the ability to get access to that, to put malware onto those devices, collect the credentials, is really easy from an attacker's perspective. And then they kind of may go up the chain to see how many other doors it opens. So they might then go up to retailers, and then try and look at how much additional information that they can gain from there, and they may kind of go up into different accounts. So the aim of the game of that is just to get a foothold into the company's environment. And sometimes it's luck of the draw who that person is, and therefore how much access that individual has. Do they have to keep laterally moving across the organization? And the prime that they're trying to get access is someone with administrative access. That's the kind of what they're looking for. But what are they ultimately trying to do? The value is in the data itself and the exfiltration of that data, particularly when we're talking about business email compromise or ransomware, espionage, if we're talking about a nation state actor. Now, there is a misconception that a lot of the attackers are only after financial data. The reality is they're after all data. Any data and all data can be monetized in one way or another. And again, it's bought and sold on the dark web, depending on what type of information that people are looking for. And that's why I sort of said the strategy is really quite simple in terms of it from a high level perspective. You've got to stop that access in and stop the exit out. So if we understand the criticality of the data, where that data resides, what people could do with that data, then our strategy kind of works backwards. So we're looking at where's that data physically residing? Is it in a data center? Is it on someone's laptop? Is it in the cloud? It's probably here everywhere. And that's where we then have to put the strategies in place to protect that data, but also protect the access in. So I've tried to make that as simple as possible. It's obviously much more complicated than that, dependent on the infrastructure and the environments that people are working in. But if you were kind of to start, where would you start? It's those two areas.
Thank you. That was actually very useful. And the way you put it, access in and exit out, in order to kind of just see the flow, really makes it very easy to visualize as well. We have a few questions as well in the meeting chat. I will put it now. Stephen Castell said, well, he agreed with you and said that digital fraud is never very far from digital innovation. Whatever may be done in cybersecurity, the fundamental perplex and the ontological unreliability of computer technology. What does Microsoft think and plan to do about this? And is it going from there, here and now? What is Microsoft doing in quantum computing, cybersecurity for the future example? So just kind of a look into the future when it comes to Microsoft specifically and the solutions it offers.
So if I talk about business email compromise in particular, so in our email solution, so a lot of customers will be utilizing Microsoft Office. So within there, you've got email, SharePoint, Teams, various different solutions within there. So in email in particular, we've invested a huge amount of money with regards to the technology that's scanning all the emails. So we're scanning them as they come in. So over 25% of all emails that come into Microsoft never actually get in front of a user, because we've already scanned it, we've already blocked it because it's a phishing email, from what we've been able to tell just from an initial scan. Comes to the next bit from there, we're looking to see what kind of if something's domain's been spoofed. So let's say Microsoft.com. It might be that someone has replaced the O with a 0. So from a user's perspective, they might look at it very quickly and go, yeah, that looks like Microsoft, because it looks like all the same. And so we're able to actually detect with those type of spoofing that sometimes happens with attackers because they're pretending to be Microsoft. But that's also the same in the name. So in the header, it may sort of say Sarah Armstrong-Smith, but actually behind it, it might actually have a Gmail address rather than a Microsoft address. So all of these things are kind of in and built. We then have safe links and safe attachments. So with a phishing email in particular, they normally have one of two things. So they'll have an attachment, and someone opens that attachment, it may then start to release malware onto the device. And so that's detonated into a safe environment. So if it has any malware on it, it's taken away before it can even get onto the endpoint. And similar again, if someone has a link to a site, then we will scan the link to make sure it's a genuine site. So we're trying to catch as many things as possible to stop malware and to stop the kind of the people inadvertently putting their credentials into a wrong site. There are still going to be things that slip through the net because the attackers are getting better and better at emulating the exact same website. So it used to be look for spelling mistakes, the graphics were really poor, the grammar was really bad, but actually some of it's a genuine exact replica of the email, of the domains and everything else. So from the end user's perspective, it's often very difficult for them to tell the difference, hence why you need the technology. So from a business email compromise perspective, what normally happens there is if the attack is actually in the email itself. And what they're trying to do is to create a trusted relationship with people either in the organization or through the supply chain in the organization. And what they tend to do, so they used to actually put an auto forwarding rule. So within your Outlook itself or email, they would kind of inadvertently just change something in the parameters, which enable them to either use specific names. So send me anything that says invoice, or send me anything with this company name or this person's name. So they're reading all the emails in the background. They may also look at the calendar to see what meetings you have, where you're going, who you're liaising with, obviously the subject of the email. But they're also learning about someone's mannerisms as well. So do you sign your name off as Robert or Rob? So even that is the mannerisms. And at some point, they will then look to interject into a legitimate conversation and swap their message out. So like I say, if you're in accounting, you're talking about an invoice or something like that, then someone might just swap out that invoice or swap into an email and change that invoice. So one of the things that Microsoft has done in particular, we have turned off the auto forward rule for every single account, past and present. And so if you want to actually be able to auto forward, so let's say that's still a legitimate thing if you're going on holiday, you might want someone to look at your emails while you're out, someone else in the team. And so that actually has to be turned back on again by an admin for that particular person. So that's one of the things that so an attacker can't get into the email and turn on the auto forwarding rule because it's not there anymore. So that's one of the simple things that we've done just to stop that part of the attack. Now, one of the things that you'll start to see from Microsoft, dependent on the technology that people are utilizing. So one of the technologies that Microsoft has is Sentinel, which is our security and orchestration tool. So it's looking at all of the technologies, all the signals, and trying to bring them into one place from an incident management perspective. A lot of that looks at the technology. So it's looking at, the servers, it might be looking at different endpoints, looking at the web browsers, the data. And the bit that gets quite difficult is, let's say, in my example of that business email compromise, where somebody has requested a change in the bank account, that has then led to a fraudulent transaction. Now, the accounts team may not realize that there has been a fraudulent transaction until much later down the road when they start to chase up the legitimate invoice or someone hasn't been paid. And they start to then work backwards and say, oh, so I can see at some point that we had a request to change this bank account or to change the invoice or to order this equipment. How do I then track back that was from a phishing email that started a month ago, 6 weeks ago? So that's one of the things that we're going to be doing, is actually interplaying what happened from a technology perspective and overlaying what happened within the business application. So it's actually bringing the two together to provide context with regards to what's happening from a business perspective and how that relates to the IT, the technology, and how they got in the environment in the first place. So I think that's going to be a really big change. And so we're kind of integrating more external applications from a business perspective into that environment. And you'll see more and more of that coming through. With regards to some of the different technologies, yes, Microsoft is invested in quantum. So we're invested in artificial intelligence. We're looking at emerging technologies and really trying to understand. So we have what we call Microsoft Research. So we're looking at how technology can be utilized for good, but also how it could be utilized for nefarious purposes. And that's why I sort of said it's a kind of a two-way balance that we have to get right with how that technology is being utilized. But it's then really assessing how that technology is going to be utilized and how a company like Microsoft can actually create those kind of codes of practice and have those good insights and have the lessons learned all around that. So we are investing in multiple different areas. And another key focus area that I mentioned as well is in the metaverse as well. So what you'll see is kind of like 3 versions of the metaverse, if you like. So you have your Facebook type of metaverse, which is very similar like to gaming, you know, with regards to fantasy world, if you like, and how people are going to interact within that kind of environment. You then have the kind of the enterprise metaverse, which is very much like you're seeing in Teams or on Zoom. And people want, so you'll start to see avatars in essence. So and people want to have the exact same experience, and it's taking on all of those lessons learned from hybrid working. And so people basically say, it doesn't matter if I'm at home, if I'm in the office, I'm on the train, I'm sat on a beach in Bermuda. If I'm joining into a meeting, I want the same experience. And so that's where we're creating these avatars. But people don't want to have an avatar that vaguely looks like them, has the same hair color and skin tone. They want it to be them. So having that kind of 3D render of themselves and it moving and you know, as they move, the avatar moves. So that's kind of one of those things that you'll start to see. And then the third area is the industrial metaverse. And this is where you have to kind of the digital twins that people are looking for. So if you can imagine you have a factory in the physical world, and you want to create an exact copy of that in the digital world. And the reason you might want to do that is because you want to try out different parameters, different things, you're doing upgrades. To do that in a physical factory is incredibly expensive. And a lot of companies can't justify the downtime of taking a production line off. You know, sometimes just taking it down for minutes can be cost millions. And so we create this digital world, an exact copy with exactly all the floors, all the equipment, all of these things. And so I can test out all the parameters in this digital world. And you're going to start to see again more and more and more of this, where the physical world, the digital world, and the biological world all kind of collide together. It's really exciting. But as you can imagine, there's a whole huge amount of risk there as well. So as much as we want to embrace all of this cool technology, we have to still kind of, let's just say, put the brakes on a little bit so that we are considering the repercussions, just not from a security perspective, but how that could impact on people's privacy, on their lives, and making sure we're doing it for the right reasons.
Thank you. Thank you for answering to that question, and I hope it answers Stephen's question as well. Just one more question before going towards your book as well. Lauren asked, and I thought it would be a good question to put in this moment. She asked, how can we create a good security culture within the workplace? So in general, Microsoft and the solutions you provide are clearly very technological, but I wanted to see how you incorporate it as well within the corporation, because any kind of client you have, you still have to make sure it's effective, the technology, and it's used properly. So how do you develop that culture, cybersecurity culture as well?
Yeah, I mean, when I talk to customers, I put everything into a business context and to an easy to explain language. And I think cybersecurity is normally seen as a very negative thing. It's where bad things happen. And the first time you come across cybersecurity or anyone working in resilience is because something bad has happened. So we want to change the mindset, first of all. And we're not just here when things go wrong. We're not just here to defend against attackers. We're actually here to enable the business to do all the cool things they want to do. So if you want to go into a new market, you've got new technology, you want to invest in you want to go into the metaverse and you want to use quantum computing, cybersecurity really has to be in right from day one. So we have this kind of principle of shift left, and what that really means is days of old, cybersecurity resilience was kind of the last thing to do before it went live. And it's like, oh, security have come along with all of their controls and all the things you can't do, and having to lock it all down, and they're ruining everyone's experience. And you know, nobody likes security. And so it was the kind of and it's just changing the mindset, as I sort of said, is making sure that it's absolutely critical. So we're even before we've even developed the product, before we've even thought about a new market, we're looking at the implications on what does this mean from security, compliance, resilience, and having that thought about right from day one and making sure it's embedded into everything. Now, if you do it right, security can be an absolutely game changer. It can give you competitive advantage. And I, particularly where we talked about, you know, that assume failure, that assume compromise mindset means that security touches into everything all the time, no matter what is going on. And so it's kind of winning hearts and minds, and trying to get people to understand that security touches into everybody's role, even if they don't realize it. So it touches into HR, it touches into our accounting teams, our frontline workers, people working on the shop floor, in manufacturing. And it's just making sure that, why should I care? That's the real thing. So it doesn't really matter who we're talking to in the business, whether we're talking to a marketing person, we're talking to someone on a call center. Cybersecurity touches into everything, and it's just making it relevant to that person. And what I try and do is to make, where's the positive in everything, in essence. So yes, bad things are going to happen. People are trying to attack us, and people are trying to steal our data, and they might be trying to sabotage our systems, but that is just part and parcel, unfortunately, now of business, with regards to just how cyber attacks are evolving, and the how they've been able to monetize a lot of the attacks as well. And so our job is to make sure, as you said, it's building it in right from the very beginning, and actually showing the value of cybersecurity all the way through the process, not just that kind of last thing to do before it goes live.
Yes, completely agree. Thank you for your time to answer these questions. I think it would be best to kind of move to the next subject as well, so that we can hear you talk on as many subjects as possible.
Thank you, Diana.
I'll just give it over to Chloe.
Great, thank you, Diana. Yeah, so it'd be great to talk a little bit more about your book, which is called Effective Crisis Management. So just before we begin, do you want to give us a bit of an intro of what the book's about, and how you came about writing the book as well, please?
Yeah, so I probably have to just roll the clock back 25 years, actually, to the beginning of my career. And so I actually started out working in the fraud department, and then I kind of pivoted into business continuity. And everything kind of happened all around about the same time. So the beginning of 1999, yes, I'm that old. That I was working for a water utility company, and they were asking for volunteers to come and work on this new project. And that new project just happened to be the Millennium Bug, that year 2000. And I think if you probably ask a lot of people of my age-ish, where they started their career, it might have been around that kind of Millennium Bug year 2000. And my role really at the time was to look at what tests had to be done on the stroke of midnight. So a lot of changes were happening in servers, and to recode servers and desktops and anything technology related. And then I kind of started thinking, yes, but what if? What if the systems don't work? What if we can't get water to people? What if we can't get people into work? So I kept in what if, what if, what if? And this felt like common sense to me. And I didn't know what I was looking at then was business continuity. It just felt like common sense. And when I realized this was a subject as an actual thing, that's kind of where I kind of pivoted my career from there. So I kind of pivoted from business continuity into disaster recovery, crisis management, data protection, and cybersecurity. And I always thought that all comes under that kind of realm of resilience. But all the way through that, so from like 1999 all the way through, I used to find myself probably at the wrong place at the wrong time, if you want to think about it. So major incidents kind of used to follow me around everywhere I went. So just to give you an example, so in 2001, I joined AXA. So I went from business continuity into disaster recovery, and so very much working on the IT side. But within a few months of me joining, then 9/11 happened. And that, again, led to huge seismic change with regards to what was normal then was it used to take 72 hours to recover from backup tapes. And all of a sudden, it was like we need to be able to recover much, much, much quicker. So that then led to that kind of need for data replication, huge change. Lots of transformation programs that were happening, not just within AXA, but across the kind of the globe. And then 2005, I moved from AXA into EY. And true to form, my very, very first day on the job was actually the 7/7 London bombings. And so I was kind of, again, thrown into the deep end. So whereas a lot of companies were asking about business continuity, disaster recovery, all of a sudden it became about crisis management. So now this terrorist attacks are happening right on our doorstep. So what do we do about it? So I then kind of was catapulted, if you like, into then looking at those crisis management exercises at a very, very big corporate level. And then 2 years later, I joined Fujitsu in 2007. And that's when I kind of then took the business continuity, the DR, the crisis management, and brought that under the realm of cybersecurity. So Fujitsu in particular, they have a lot of outsourced customers, outsourced contracts, and that can be the whole of IT or part of the IT. And so it's kind of bringing all of that together, like what's critical and why, what are we trying to protect? And I think I was at Fujitsu for 12 years. And even in 2009, I affectionately call it my year of crisis now. At the time, it was horrendous. I literally had 3 incidents on the bounce. So it started off with one of the biggest corporate frauds in history. It's one of our partners in India. It turned out one of the CEO, the CFO were actually cooking the books and making them up. So the tune of about $700 million. It's actually referred to as kind of India's Enron, if you like. So I was kind of deeply embroiled into that. I was involved in that for months on end, and as that one ended, I kind of went straight into the next major incident, which then happened to be the H1N1 pandemic. So I know we've just been talking about COVID, but this, when we talk about pandemics, we had one 10 years before. And at that time, this was the first influenza outbreak in 41 years. And there's we kind of like the pandemic plans, there was no precedence, for a lot of these things. And then, so that was months embroiled into that one. And then straight after that, straight into another incident, which was industrial action. But all the way through that time, so all through my career, I've had major incidents. So that's just a handful of them. I've had floods, fires, so fraud, cyber attacks. We even had an anthrax scare in one of our offices as well. So one of our customers was under attack. And that's kind of like that. When I talk about effective crisis management, it's kind of looking backwards into all of the things that have happened in that lifetime and being able to kind of think about what's the good and what's the bad, in essence. And so how the book actually came about was Cyber Awareness Month, not last year, the year before. I just run a daily thing on LinkedIn, in essence. It was my A to Z of crisis management. So it was like A, B, C over consecutive days. And I got really good feedback. And one of my colleagues in Australia, he was like, well, you should really write a book. And I was like, yes, okay, like I've got time to write a book. And she said, I don't know, you should definitely write a book and share all of these experiences. And then he kind of come to me and said, I've got a publisher that wants a synopsis for the book. And I said, okay, I'll write the synopsis of the book. And then it was kind of come around. So, but if I'm going to publish a book, I want to have it to come out the exact same time for Cyber Awareness Month, the year just gone in October of last year. And so they kind of got to June and they said, okay, so if you want to have it published by October, you need to have the manuscript in by August. So I literally had 2 months to sit and write this book, burning the midnight oil, a full-time job, writing a book in evenings and weekends. And then so the book then came out it actually was published at the end of October. And it's still true to form. So it's still the A to Z. And interspersed into there, I have included 7 case studies. So these case studies are the worst of their kind, in essence. And I've done that deliberately. And part of what I'm trying to do with the book is how bad does it have to get before we make a change? And so there are examples like 9/11 is kind of one of them. And it's kind of like when you look at having these major events, and sometimes they follow with a public inquiry, and those public inquiries really reveal a lot of interesting information. And so one of the other case studies is the Grenfell Tower, Fireblock Tower. And so there's always a pattern. So it's always the fact that there's been warning signs, there's been audit reports, even with the Grenfell Tower fire block, there had been at least 5 or 6 other residential fires leading up to this one. And so it's just kind of sort of saying we're very, very bad as an industry at learning lessons. It was always like, oh, thank God it was someone else. That's not my sector. It's a different country. And so we don't learn when these type of incidents happen. We kind of just move on and we keep moving on until something happens of such a magnitude, as I say, as 9/11, as some of these other quite seismic scale events, that we then kind of look back and go, well, how did it happen? How did we get here? And as I say, it's those missed warning signs, it's all of those things. And so the ultimate aim is not just to address some of these case studies and the lessons learned, but it's really then thinking about, to the other person that raised about positive change, that's really what I'm trying to do, is that if we keep repeating the same thing, we're going to keep having the same result. And so we really kind of need to put that stake in the ground, and really look at and have a good hard look at ourselves. And some of that does come down to culture. So what culture do you have when people tell you they've made mistakes, when things are going wrong, when you have an audit report or a third party report and it's got lots of reds and lots of ambers in it? What do you do? Do you welcome that report and say, great, we've got an opportunity to fix all of these things? Or do you go, oh, let's hope nobody notices, and kind of put it under the carpet with all those other things that we don't want anyone to see? Problem is, over time, these things have a habit of coming out. And so, as I sort of saying, at some point, if we leave it and we leave it too long, we are going to have a major incident. And that's the kind of that in essence is what the book's about. But what I'm trying to then do is, what are the kind of the key skills and attributes that are needed? So it's looking at some of the proactive elements in terms of understanding a strategy, the plan, making sure people are prepared, again, looking at the culture of the organization, and then thinking about, if we have that assume compromise and assume failure mindset, then how do we actually manage the crisis when it hits? So it's kind of looking at it from 2 perspectives, in essence.
That was really great and fantastic to know a little bit more about the book. It sounds like it's an incredibly interesting read, with a lot of anecdotes and case studies as well. How has it been, or how have you found the book launch since it launched in October?
It's been really great. It's been a really great reception. It feels still a bit weird when I say I'm an author. Just sounds like I authored a book. But I think the best thing is I've written it from my perspective. So it's written in the first person. And one thing it is not a textbook. It is not this is what a plan looks like, so here's a template. It's not that at all. And I think there are lots of books that kind of can give you that, here's a nice little plan for a business continuity plan or crisis management, here's how to test it. And so what I was really cognizant about is kind of reflecting on someone who's been on the front line. So someone is at the operational level, at the strategic level, and kind of really bringing it to life. So I've given the case studies, but I've also reflected on some personal stories as well, particularly when it comes down to well-being, and how people deal with stress, how people deal with fatigue, and those type of things. But it's written from my perspective, and a lot of the feedback I've had is having that, understanding that from the actual person's perspective, how I've written it and given that kind of insider view of the world. That's kind of been one of the most positive things and takeaways that people have given to me in terms of feedback.
Fantastic. And a couple of questions from the audience. One is from Carmenella. Sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. What is your best advice for women starting out in the cybersecurity industry?
Well, I just say do what you love. Do what you absolutely love, because I think there's a lot of pressure with people sort of thinking, when I go into cybersecurity, I mean, cybersecurity is huge, as we sort of said, it touches onto every area possible. But I think people thinking, okay, I need to be really technical. I need to understand pen testing. I need to understand how to work on a security operations center. And if you want to go into that route, you can. But I would just sort of, when I look at it, is what is the thing that really gets you excited, and finding a way to pivot from there. And for me, my ability to then pivot from that kind of business continuity, disaster recovery, and cybersecurity is because it enabled me to tap into my creative side. So when I was at school, my very, very favorite subject in the world was art. And I then kind of I bring the two together, because for business continuity, it's all about the big picture. It's all about your ability to take a stand back and kind of see how all of the things kind of disconnect together. And so a lot of it is not the technical skills, because technical skills can be learned. I think it's a lot to do with the softer skills. So I think for me in particular, it's the creativity, it's the problem solving, it's the communication. It's, as I say, it's being able to kind of see how all the things kind of connect together. And so I think there's as I said, sometimes women, and I'm overgeneralizing and stereotyping, and I don't like to do that. But sometimes women can be put off if it's very techy. Some women love being very techy. And so I just think it's just important, first and foremost, to think about the thing, as I said, the thing you love, and to pivot off there. Sometimes I think people can then, from a cybersecurity, there's huge amount of opportunity in sort of governance and compliance in the risk area. Some people really love to get really deep into architecture. So there's so many different areas. And even with Microsoft, we have what we call Microsoft Learn. It literally kind of, it's Microsoft Learn in a search engine. And this gives access to multiple free training. And the really thing that's really cool about it is, if you kind of think, I don't know where to start. And so it's like, so are you a student? Are you, what's your background? What's your experience? What are you interested in? And it gives you different learning paths. So without you kind of even knowing the outcome necessarily, you can just try different things. You might say, I've got a real interest in machine learning or artificial intelligence. I'd really like to learn more about networks. I'd really like to know more about databases or anything like that. And so you can just take as many as you want. And hopefully you might kind of start one and go, this is the most dullest thing ever in the world, and just stop and try something else. Or you might think this is the best thing since sliced bread. And therefore it gives you the path, but it also says what to do next. And I think that's just, so it's hard for me to kind of say generically as a woman where someone should start. But I think whether you're a man, woman, whatever level of experience you have, the Microsoft Learn platform is actually really cool. As I said, it's completely free, and it lets people do it at their own time. And some of those can also then be converted into taking exams and certificates if people want to go that far down. So some people want to learn how to administer Azure, or how to be a service system administrator. So there are some more techie type of things that people can do, but I really think there's just so much opportunity, and anybody who wants to come into work in cybersecurity, you're welcome with open arms, because we need as many people from as many different backgrounds as possible.
Fantastic, thank you. And that was also a really great resource to share, definitely one that I'm going to be looking at as well. One more question that is linked to the first one that I just asked you is, what is your one do and one don't for your career so far? So I guess out of your experience so far, what would be your one do and one don't?
I think my one do is, as I said, it's follow your passion. Follow the thing that really gets you excited. And I've kind of gone down different paths myself and come back out again. And I just kind of learned that the thing that gets me excited, the thing that really gives me the passion, is the technology first and foremost. So I love working in a technology environment. I love the possibilities that technology can provide. But as I sort of said, it's really getting into the depths of the pros and cons, and where are we going, really considering some of the cybersecurity and resilience risk, because I kind of see it as they all kind of come together. So I say follow your passion. The don'ts, as kind of the things that I've learned along the way, is that sometimes what can be misconstrued as being passionate can also be seen as being a little bit emotional, and that's a kind of a thing that women seem to get targeted with as well. So, you know, you're emotional if you get excited about things or overexcited. But sometimes I used to think, oh, maybe I need to tone it down a bit, you know. But I kind of learned that no, you have to be who you are. You are who you are. And the more you start to turn things off or, you know, do things you don't really want to do, you end up changing yourself. And so I just think that's why I sort of said the most important thing is to think about the passion, think about the thing that you really love, and to pivot off that. Now you are going to get into areas where you've probably made the worst mistake ever, but these are the things that you learn from, and even the things that I've been in, you know, horrendous situations, horrendous incidents, and nobody wants to be involved in. But actually, sometimes you have to go through the really difficult times to learn from them. Because if we never learn, we never change. And so I would just sort of say to people, don't be afraid to dip your toe in, because you can always just dip it straight out again. With regards to, you know, trying different things, seeing what you like, seeing what you absolutely hate, and then kind of going from there. And that's why I sort of said, you know, it's just a really great thing to be able to try different things.
That's great. Thank you very much for all of the advice. If I pass on to Anna now to talk a little bit more about your role as an advisor to startups.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chloe.
Thank you, Chloe. So my question is, we know that you're passionate about working with SMEs and helping businesses navigate their tech journey. So can you describe your role in as an advisor to startups and SMEs, and what kind of advice you provide?
Yeah, I would sort of say my role at Microsoft and my role as an advisor for SMEs are kind of like two opposite sides of the scale, if you like. So with Microsoft, I'm talking to big, huge enterprises. And at the opposite end of the scale, I'm talking to startups and SMEs. And so what I'm trying to do is take all the things I learn from talking to these big enterprises and bring it back down to the smaller ones. And a lot of the time, the smaller ones, they're startups, they're all technology companies. And so they might be thinking about a new product that they've designed. They're trying to enter a new market. And the danger is when you're a startup, you think you've got the coolest product in the world and it's the best thing ever. And you're going to sell it to all of these big companies and you're going to make your millions and everything else. Now, that's a great dream. The reality is something quite different. And so I'm just trying to bridge the two together and to give some sort of reality. So if you're making, let's say, for example, you have made this great product and it's really cool, and a lot of them are really cool, you need to be able to defend every statement that you're making. So if you said this beats every other product on the market, you know, hands down, you better prove it. So it's very easy to make these kind of big, bold statements. But in terms of then how you go to market, how you kind of sell this yourself, it's built on trust. So right from day one, you have to build that trust into your product, your brand, who you stand for, what do you want to be known for. And so it's really then making sure that they understand themselves, their position in the market, but also how they're selling themselves and how they're branding themselves. So I spend a lot of time in that kind of area with regards to then them understanding the fact that these big, huge enterprises are not going to want to do business with someone they've never heard of. So you kind of have to prove your worth, you know, so you have to kind of go up the chain, you know, prove that how your product works, prove your services, prove all of these things, and then hopefully try and move up into some of the bigger companies. So a lot of the time, as I sort of said, sometimes it's about their positioning in the market, how they position their product, but also then with regards to what does the future look like, and kind of how do they stand out from the crowd with regards to, you know, who they are, what they stand for, and hopefully what this product is going to do.
On the cybersecurity note of that, would you say that startups usually think of cybersecurity for a later time? Or did you notice that they are starting now paying more attention to that, and from the beginning paying more attention and actually having somebody, a cybersecurity person, working and making sure that from the beginning they are growing their company on cyber safe
Well, a lot of the companies I'm talking to are cybersecurity companies. So they're kind of bridging the gap in terms of looking where the niche is, how they can enter the market. So some of these might be they're very deep into encryption or artificial intelligence or blockchain. So they found this very specific thing in the market, but they are all cybersecurity related. I would sort of say the challenge is if they're building a product, they are thinking about cybersecurity from a product perspective. So they might be thinking about how they're coding, how they're building it in, and they're building it in by design and by default into kind of the product. And then what I'm trying to do is make sure they extend that wider into their business environment. So in exactly the same way as any other enterprise. So you've all got products and services, but you've also got people that work in your organization, and those people are also in different roles. So you may have obviously your end users, not just your developers, but you might have someone working in HR, you might have somebody working from a commercial or from a sales perspective. And so you kind of have to do as I say, not as I do, that kind of mentality where I'm trying to get people to buy into my product and my services that has all the bells and whistles from a security perspective. But if I don't follow that through to the rest of my business, why would I buy from you? And so it's then making sure that the philosophy goes across the entirety of the business. And that's kind of what we were touching on right at the beginning, is making sure that security plays into every single person's role, irrespective of who they are in the organization. So, even with HR, they've got to think about the privacy, they've got to protect personal data. If it's marketing, you've got business plans, you've got strategies, you might be talking to investors, and, potentially, if your product's that good, you also might be trying to protect it with a patent as well. So you then have to protect the intellectual property of that new product, that service. So everything, whether it's small company, big company, multinational company, it's really then, as you say, the security elements play into everything. And it's your ability to make sure that your strategy, your vision, what you stand for, the trust in that product and in the company encompasses the strategy, the security into that as well.
Thank you. Another question is, can you talk about the challenges faced by startups and SMEs and how you help them overcome those challenges?
Well, it's a very competitive market, particularly from a cybersecurity perspective. I think the market, I don't know what its current valued at. I think it's valued at around $8 trillion by 2025. So I think that the market's huge, the competitive environment's huge. But I sort of said I've worked with 2 startups right from almost the beginning. So not quite from inception, but not far after that. And I've worked with another company that's probably about 7 years old that's then had an injection of investment. And so with the 2 startup ones in particular, it was really then from two perspectives. It's the how they are designing the product, but how they are talking about the product from an external perspective. So again, looking at how your product compares to competitors, and you'll be surprised that some of them don't even know who their competitors are. And so, so you kind of need to understand that, with regards to who are you going up against. So if a company does want to compare product A to product B or C or D or everything else, what makes yours stand out from everyone else's? And that's why I was saying about defending the claims with regards to what the product does, what your company does. And so a lot of the companies right from the outset have spent a lot of time, not just in the go-to-market strategy, but what's their vision? Who am I? And so even when I go into some people's websites, it doesn't matter who they are and how big they are, I always go to the about in the company website. And what I'm expecting to see there is the history, who's the leadership team, what's the strategy, what's the vision, and is it compelling enough? Because I want people buy from people ultimately. There's probably, they can choose from a multiple different types of technologies. And probably when you compare them, there's probably not a much difference in some of the technology. Some of them are way out there. Some of them are, completely, off the grid with regards to the type of innovation that they have and the coolness of them. But if you're if you're kind of got a product that's very, very similar to everyone else's product, then it does come down to the people. It does come down to the leadership. It does come down to their go-to-market strategy. And that's the bit that I'm kind of involved in. I'm an advisor to the company itself about how they position themselves, and how they position their product in the market ultimately.
Thank you. Thank you. I think we have some questions. So the latest one is from M. Ray. What are the most undervalued aspects of security resilience you see occur with fresh startups? What's being overlooked while startups try to put their business marketing operating models into motion?
I think one of the challenges is the speed in which that they're trying to get their product out. Now the problem is once a product has gone live, and that doesn't matter whether you're a startup or a big international, if that product goes into the market with flaws in it, and it could be that you've then got you've stated that you are going to fix the problems, you're going to release a release, you're going to fix all the bugs, but if they don't get applied properly, it gets really, really difficult. So I think the challenge is that there's that kind of that competitive edge that that companies are trying to get. They want to be the first on the market. They want to be the first to bring their new product out, and this really cool thing. But if you jump the gun too quickly, and if the product doesn't work, it doesn't do what it said on the tin. That's why I said you have to defend what you're saying, because someone will always try and trip you up on it. Someone will be, particularly if it's a competitor, they're just dying to try to prove you wrong. And so I think sometimes there's a healthy tension that's needed between wanting to get a product out, but getting a product out that is a viable product and it's actually going to do what it's needed, because you can fall at the first hurdle and fall really badly if you say you don't have the basics in place with regards to just how that product's being managed, and just like giving assurances when it comes to not just security, but having the resilience in place as well. So there's a lot of work that has to be done in the background to make sure that the product is being managed properly. You've got all of those steps in place, and with I think what really put some of these companies above the parapet is what you do when something goes wrong. And it kind of comes back to that kind of crisis management element as well. So if the product doesn't work, it's got flaws in it, it's got security risks, some of those could actually be dangerous depending on what market you're in. And so it's the willingness to actually do something proactive about it. So are you going to do a product recall? Are you going to take it off the market? Or are you just going to, like, as I sort of say, just kind of curl under your desk and hope no one's noticed? And so it's not the fact that you've had a problem which is the issue, it's how you deal with it. That's the real thing that shows people apart, and it shows companies apart from their competitors as well.
Thank you. Another question from Santana. Getting hacked and having your data and money stolen can lead to anxiety, depression, and PTSD. Mental health in cybersecurity is so important because it's a stressful field where burnout is high from recent research. How is Microsoft addressing these well-being issues for customers? And is your book covering these topics?
Yes. So I have an entire chapter on well-being, and it's addressing those very things. That's why I sort of said about the culture is really important. So how do you treat people when they've made a mistake? Now, as I sort of said earlier on, 80% of all cyber attacks start with some kind of credential theft. So, let's say for argument's sake that someone has clicked the link and they've inadvertently given their credentials away, or they've done something they didn't mean to do. If that then gets reported to the company, or that then leads to some kind of cyber attack. So if you're able to track it back and say, oh, well, the reason why we've had this ransomware attack is because the person over there clicked the link and then they gave their credentials away and that gave them access in. So it's how you deal with that. So do you point fingers? Are you looking for someone to blame? And that's a big part of my book. So I've got another chapter on justice, which talks about we shouldn't be playing the blame game. What we should be looking to do is look at the process rather than to blame a person. And so that's really important. And the well-being is in different aspects, because it's looking at the fact that in the current climate that we've been in, with the amount of change that's happened with people, so they've got new processes, they're having to work remotely, and for some people that's been really isolating. So if they don't have family, they don't have friends, suddenly they're cut off from everybody. Either they've been ill, their family's ill, they've had to deal with fatalities in the family, and so it kind of just causes this ripple effect. And it's making and having empathy, which is another chapter in my book. It talks about the importance of empathy and really having a deep appreciation for what's going on in people's lives. And when something goes wrong, it's very easy to say, oh, we take your security really seriously, blah, blah, blah. But it doesn't really get to the fact that thousands of people's records have been breached or their identity's been stolen. This has real world impact. And we also see cybersecurity as a victimless crime. So it's not like violent crime. When someone's been attacked in the street, we give them lots of sympathy. Oh, you've been a victim, they're looked after by the police and all of these things. If you're a victim of a cyber crime, what tends to happen, it was your fault. It was your fault that you had, that either you were the victim of a scam, a fraud, you clicked the link, you let someone in, you've got really bad controls, you haven't done this, you haven't done that. And so we naturally want to blame, we want to point fingers. And a lot of this does come down to culture. And so I sort of said that part of it is the fact that when you've been in this environment, people are under lots of stress. They're more vulnerable to phishing attacks. They're more likely to make mistakes. And so it's kind of taking that on board. And so there's two aspects to that. It's understanding the environment that they're in and understanding how we're looking after those people. So do we have the right HR policies? Can we identify that there's changes in behavior? There's something going on in the work environment. So the onus is on the company and line managers and people in the organization to make sure that people are acutely aware of what's going on in that person's life. But the second part as well is the incident response. And when you're in the incident response team, again, it can be very overwhelming for people. So whether you're in the middle of a cyber attack, a business continuity incident, you want to work, you want to operate as many hours as possible. And there's a natural tendency, that human instinct to want to help, to do all these things, but that can lead to fatigue. And again, if people are tired, they're more likely to make mistakes. And so they might make the wrong action, they might not do something, they might have ultimately might do something wrong. And again, so we have to tackle it from both sides. That does come down to the culture of the organization, and that well-being is so important. And sometimes the onus is on us to actually just say, stop, you need a break. Because a lot of people won't do it themselves and they won't tell you they need a break. And so we then have to be able to kind of look at all of the things that are going on, what's going on in that person's life, or are we kind of throwing them into that incident because we've had this cyber attack, and just state, no, you've got to stop. You just got to have a break. You kind of got to refuel, recharge, and then come back. Because you're no good to anybody ultimately when you're tired and stressed, because as I say, these mistakes that can lead to worse things ultimately. So yes, I do cover a lot of that in the book with regards to, as I said, the well-being, the empathy, and some of the key attributes of being a crisis leader as well is part of that. So it's not just looking at the technical aspects, it's looking at the skills and the attributes of that leader as well.
One last question from the chat is about girls. How can we promote more girls to consider careers in computer science and other STEM fields while in school? And have you found that certain countries' schools are better than others?
Oh, that's a good question. I think I was when I was at Fujitsu, we used to have a grad scheme, and I remember I used to be co-chair of the Women's Business Network, and I remember going to meet some of our graduates, and I sort of said to them, why Fujitsu? Ultimately, why did you want to join? And for some, it was just another grad scheme. It said that there's just such a competitive environment to get into a graduation scheme, and so for some, It was just, I just need to get in. I just need to do a subject. But IT is the place to be. IT is where we want to be. That's kind of what we want to do. We don't quite know what bit of IT yet, but that's where we want to go. And then for some, I remember talking to one woman, and she said even when she was at school, so I'm probably going back about 5, 6 years, so not even that long ago. And she said computer science was always kind of taught as a boys' subject. And I said, so what's the equivalent of for girls? She said, oh, it's drama. Because of all the reality TV. And I was just like, that's so sad. And she said, yeah, because I love computer science. But I said, but when I went to then join the class, there was only like 1 or 2 girls in the and it's overwhelming. And so she was like, oh, I didn't really want to do it, but I didn't want to do drama either. And so she kind of went for a subject in the middle. But I think it's just that, I mean, this subject for girls and subject for boys, that's the whole thing that we kind of need to get rid of, because ultimately it doesn't matter what gender you are. You know, we need as much diversity as possible. I mean, diversity in its broadest sense. So we need different cultures, we need different age groups, we need different ways of working. And it's also the ability to take people from completely different environments and bring them in and show them what a great career in cybersecurity you can have. So I'm not sure if there's any particular country that stands out. I think the UK could do better, if I'm honest. I think maybe some of the European, maybe Indian countries as well, kind of have a better track record of bringing women into some of the environments at a younger age. But I'm not sure there's one that really just sort of stands out. And I think it just comes down to the attitude, where, as I say, these kind of subjects for girls and boys just needs to kind of end completely. And just, you know, just as I say, follow whatever your passion is, whatever your interest is, there's a career for you.
Definitely. If you don't mind, Nana, I think I'll just take over, because I think we just got into the Q&A part of the evening, especially because we're getting questions on every topic we've handled so far and more. Somebody's also talking about women breaking into cybersecurity and how this has been challenging. Is there any platform for women to get technical experience to kickstart in their career?
As I sort of say, I think the Microsoft Learn is really good. I have also been a mentor on another external platform called Caps Lock, which is actually taking men and women from completely different environments, and they put them on a 12-week learning course. And so they almost kind of sheep dip them into lots of different areas. So they learn about business continuity, incident response, they learn about technical elements and testing. They get certified in multiple different things. So they learn about ISO 27001 and various different things. And I think this has got a really, really good reputation. And as I sort of said, it's taking people from lots of different backgrounds, lots of different ages. It's loads of women on there as well. And then it's not only at the end of the 12 weeks, they're qualified into multiple different areas. And again, a lot of them can choose their path where they want to go from there. But they also then help them find their first job as well, which is, I think, is really cool. So they're working with a lot of recruiters across different companies as a way of then helping them just to bridge that gap and find their first role in. And for some of the people, they're taking a step backwards. So they might be more senior in their current role, but they're so excited to be in cybersecurity that they kind of go slightly backwards just to get a foot in the door, and then they're able to kind of progress up from there. But the people who've been through it, they've just got such great feedback from it. So you have programs like that. You have programs that are very, I wouldn't say it's not just women, it's from different groups of people as well. But there are those type of programs that specialize specifically in cybersecurity. And but I said, there's the Microsoft Learn platform, which is free. There is cybersecurity, but there's also multiple different roles in there as well. So you might even just say, I like the thought of cybersecurity. That's why I said sometimes you need to dip a toe in and maybe dip out again. And if you don't like it, you might just sort of say, well, maybe I prefer to work on the data side, or I prefer to work in governance or risk or multiple different areas, or I want to work more in applications, coding. So many different roles that kind of just spin out of it, really. So there's lots of opportunities out there, that's going to help you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And when it comes to, helping girls into getting into cybersecurity and getting that passion that you talked about, do you have any programs that you work with as well into that direction? So with schools specifically?
Yeah, we do different programs in Microsoft that do careers days and things like that. So I also go to a few universities as well, so doing visiting lectures. Some of those are specialized in cybersecurity courses, and some of those are a bit more generic with regards to just getting people to think about the different careers. So I kind of go back to some schools and then into universities as well, because sometimes even the university students, they're kind of like, I still don't know what I want to do. I might be majoring in a specific topic, but it's only when you start to learn and when you start to kind of go into the workplace. And so we do a lot of, we have interns as well. Something that's very interesting that people might not be aware of is the Cyber First program, which is sponsored by National Cybersecurity Centre. And they do a specific program for girls, in essence. And so they sponsor them to do bursaries. And then they're placed into companies as well as kind of that internship. So they're kind of in that gap year that they may have. So that's very much about women or girls and getting them into cybersecurity. So there are various different programs. But as I say, as a person, I have gone into schools and universities as well.
And going a bit back to what we talked before getting into the career talks and everything, I wanted to ask you specifically, because it's not that many chances that we have to talk with a security advisor. What was the particularly challenging crisis management situation that you have dealt with throughout your career until now? I'm guessing you talk about, like, as you said, you talk about a few in the book as well, but what is one that really stands out?
I think as I sort of said, 2009 ended up being my year of crisis, where I had 3 major incidents on the bounce. I think the one that probably stood out the most from that one was dealing with the corporate fraud. It's just so unusual to have a CEO of a company committing the fraud themselves. And I think from that one, it was really, they were a huge company, a huge partner. They provided all of the remote management and all of the network support into our data centers. So they were playing a really pivotal role. And at the beginning, a lot of the time with the middle management layer, they didn't understand, they didn't know what was going on. And so there was a lot of communication, there was a lot of kind of desire, if you like, to try and get the services back up and running as quickly as possible. But I think what dawned on us was, after a while, the communication just stopped. And so we had to kind of sit there, and it sounds like a cliche, but this was really the epitome of thinking outside of the box. So we had to think, how do you take on a global service without any people, without any procedures, and without any knowledge of any of the infrastructure? And so we were thinking about all the novel things that we could do, and how we were going to bring this service on, how we were going to engage with people, how we were going to protect the customer. And I think so we were coming up with all of these kind of wacky plans, and even one of them was the HR manager, his wife was Indian. So he said, well, maybe we just go to India. We put out boards outside the office and said, if you used to work here on this project, come and meet us down the road, and we'll give you a job on Monday, so you just need to bring your pay slip, you need to do all of these things. And so we're just thinking that, so we need the people, and we need the people with the knowledge. And so we're just going to have to kind of think of all of the things that we need to do. But the interesting thing from there was not only just having to create this crisis management plan, but also we had to think about the legalities of actually being able to trigger bringing on the services without being in breach of contract. Now, you'd have thought actually the fact that someone's committed this fraud of this nature, you're automatically in breach of contract. But well, money is still changing hands and services are still being provided to a certain extent. We still have to be very careful about when we legitimately can start to take on services, break the contract. And we can't do that too early because we can't leave the customer impacted. So it's a real balancing act. But I think the one thing that it taught me and taught the company was how much trust we put into a third party. And I think this is a lesson learned for everybody with regards to the trust that people have. And so what we were again thinking about, and at some point we're going to have to take control of the network. And so it's kind of like, well, log in and log them off, in essence, in simplicity terms. And they were like, yeah, we can't do that because they actually operate all of the network on our behalf. And so they could actually kick us off the network. And we said, oh, how embarrassing would that be? That they can actually take control and kick us out. So we said, so we were getting to the point where we're just going to start having to pull cables out the back of servers and walk around the data center, pull all the network cables out. And so it's completely isolated, build a new network and put it back again. So yeah, we had to kind of come up with all of these weird and wonderful things. And, in true form, just as you're about to pull the plug, just as you're about to put all of these things into play, another company came in and bought the company that was the one that was kind of the committing fraud, bought everything, the infrastructure, the people and everything, bought it very, very cheap, I have to say, and then committed to paying all the people, getting all the services back up online as quickly as possible. But I think we kind of come that close to, I would have said it was a genuine disaster in terms of the services, the management and everything else. So that one was intense. It was, I would sort of say it was probably about 8 to 10 weeks non-stop thinking of plans and thinking of all the weird and wonderful things that had to be done. And then it was a kind of, then, as I sort of said, it was that incident was managed and managed very well. And having then worked with this other company, and then as soon as you think, all right, now I can take a break. And then we had a pandemic. So at the time, it was extremely stressful, I have to say. And that's why I look back affectionately and say it's a year of crisis. At the time, it was anything but. It was incredibly stressful for everyone involved. And it's kind of, and that's why in the book, I have a chapter all about well-being and kind of thinking about how some of these things manifest and how you deal with it and making sure that people are taking proper breaks. But that's the one that kind of stands out for me. It's just kind of a very, very weird and strange event that is not a normal event. So I would sort of say sometimes you have lots of IT failures, lots of power cuts and things like that. I've dealt with loads of those, but sometimes you just have something which is so unique that it's just really very difficult to manage, and it is that kind of thinking outside of the box. But also, even with the pandemic we've just had, nobody expected it to go on for 2.5 years, and so you could say, has that just been one big incident, or has that been a catalyst of incidents that have been running in parallel?
Yeah, thank you for your response. And I think that it's really important and current right now, considering that I have heard in the domain and in the industry of cybersecurity the talk about third parties and just vendors, suppliers, and the importance they have and how critical they are to so many businesses. And thank you for all of the questions you have answered tonight. I am really looking forward to your book and to the event that we will have with you regarding the book, and to talk more about it and to go more in depth into the specific cases that you talk about in there. And in case nobody else has any questions, I think we've already answered all the questions in the chat. And it was a truly pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Diana.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. That was truly incredible. This is Darling again. And I must say, please join me, everybody, in thanking our wonderful speaker, Sarah. It's been really great. Also, please join me in thanking Diana, Anna, Chloe, and our hidden technical wizard, David Grundy, who is also here. So thank you to all of our people, the BCS people, and indeed, thanks to you for being part of this great audience. Now, as far as our speaker is concerned, I mean, what hasn't even been mentioned really is all of the incredible accolades. She's got the top cybersecurity awards, the Distinguished Speaker Awards, the Most Influential Leader in the UK Tech Awards, and of course, she's also a BCS Fellow. So this is all great stuff. Now, I said that all of us in BCS are members of the BCS, British Computer Society, Chartered Institute for IT, and I thoroughly implore you to take a look and join BCS as well if you can. Come and join us. And of course, we will look forward to getting a rerun of this in terms of the video that's being taken by David and hopefully will be released within a week or so. But I know that what I would love to do is to meet Sarah in person and to get her book. Wouldn't you? If you would, then we urge you, number one, to look it up and try and buy that straight away. But if you really want to come and meet her in person and get a personal signed copy of her book and so on, we're trying to create that opportunity on April the 3rd at BCS in central London. So stand by, look at our events, and look out for that event on April the 3rd for a special book event with Sarah. Meanwhile, of course, check out other BCS events, check out our events of the BCS 3 branches, Central, North, and South, and look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you very much. All the best for now.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.